There's not a lot of meaningful news between Christmas and New Year's. Everybody basically takes a break, and we all coast into the new year with mostly fluff pieces about holiday cooking or decorating tips or advice for sticking to your upcoming resolution. The only news that doesn't take a season's rest is that written by those sadly enduring the holidays, managing their chronic Trump derangement syndrome, offering detailed updates on the caloric content of the president's Christmas dessert choices or the objective tackiness of the First Lady's Christmas selfie. There is no greater joylessness than policing other people's joy on the most joyous of holidays. So rather than pretend there's some incredibly important news to discuss this week, I thought maybe this is a time better suited for an internet dumpster dive. And I clicked straight to the deepest e-dumpster I know, the Huffington Post main page. As we'd expect, their top story is literal horseshit. Scroll down a bit and ooh, Cenk Uygur is getting ripped by purity testers outraged over things he wrote more than a decade ago. I don't like the thought police, but I gotta admit I do enjoy seeing ideological cannibals feasting on brown buffalo burgers. Keep scrolling and here's a gem. Should white supremacists be allowed to practice law? The legal profession is supposed to weed out people who aren't morally fit to be lawyers, but they let neo-Nazis in. Interesting, our author apparently thinks lawyers are setting the social benchmark for morality. When I think lawyer, I think necessarily defending the worst scum of society, the thieves, the murderers, the pedophiles, with the goal of getting them exonerated even when they're guilty. When I think lawyer, I don't think moral fitness. I think moral flexibility. But that point aside, upon actually reading this article, it's not quite as terrible as I suspected it might be. It has some interesting historical nuggets, like the case of Matthew Hale, a white supremacist who, despite being qualified, was denied a law license from the state of Illinois on the grounds that his views were at odds with the state's commitment to the principle of equality under the law. Hale unsuccessfully fought that decision in court, represented by famous Nazi lawyer Glenn Greenwald, who said at the time the process resembled a Spanish Inquisition-like interrogation of a person's political thoughts, religious convictions, and core beliefs. The vast bulk of the questions were those which would be expected from a tribunal charged with policing a person's thoughts and beliefs, not a person's conduct, character, and fitness to practice law. Like with every attempt to have the state regulate free speech, it always starts with the most extreme examples, but it does necessarily set a precedent, whether that's the intention or not. If you don't recall who Glenn Greenwald is, he's that gay Nazi born to Jewish parents, known primarily for his role in scrutinizing government surveillance based on classified documents leaked by Edward Snowden. At the time, even the ADL, yes, the very same ADL that recently labeled Pepe a hate symbol, defended Hale's right to spew his venom without restriction. And that is an ancient history. It's 1998. It's less than 20 years ago. Amazing to consider how quickly cultural values can change. But I don't want to get lost on this one piece of history. I want to focus on the generalities of the fundamental question presented in this article. Should we have ideological tests, ideological prerequisites before we allow people to pursue certain professions? The precedent of Matthew Hale is an interesting one, but it's clearly the exception and not the rule. Writes our author, because of their inside understanding of how the legal system works, lawyers are uniquely equipped to protect themselves from charges of wrongdoing. Because of this, the legal profession is one of the few that requires members to uphold a certain moral standard. In addition to taking the bar exam, aspiring attorneys face a character and fitness test before they can be admitted to their state's bar and practice law. Lawyers can, in theory, get kicked out of the profession at any time for failing to uphold their state bar association's ethics rules. Okay, so what are these rules? They vary state by state, I know that much. So I first checked in my home state, Montana. The Montana Supreme Court says those practicing law in this state may be disciplined for acts in violation of the rules of professional conduct, for acts contrary to the highest standards of honesty, justice, and morality, criminal conduct, contempt of court, and so forth. And what do all of these terms have in common? Their actions, not thoughts. This policy disciplines behavior, not ideas. It does not constrain ideology. it constrains conduct. But hey, I live in some podunk flyover Trump voting Nazi state anyway, right? Let's check the policies from some of our civilized coastal neighbors. In California, state bar rules prohibit unlawful discrimination against law practice employees on the basis of race, origin, sex, orientation, religion, age, or disability when hiring or firing. The same is true in New York. And that's a bit closer to prohibiting certain opinions about races, but still, it's punishing behavior associated with those opinions, not punishing the opinions themselves. I'm certainly not the authority on this issue. It's new to me, but I'm not aware of any state in the union that has an ideological test for bar admission, and frankly, I would be surprised if that standard were deemed constitutional at all. Beyond that issue, though, at the core of this article is an unstated question, but it's actually a question on which this entire article and all of its reasoning depend. Is there such a thing as an immoral opinion or an immoral thought? To consider or advocate the punishment of people for ideas or thoughts on moral grounds, you must believe yes. From my perspective, an immoral opinion is like wisdom from the Huffington Post. There is no such thing. Morals and ethics are concepts to guide how we interact with and treat one another. I am the sole owner of my own ideas and my own thoughts, and since no one else has a legitimate claim to my thoughts cannot treat others in immoral or unethical ways. We don't think of a moral man as one who says the right things. We think of him as one who does the right things. Conversely, we ought not to think of the immoral man as one who says the wrong things. We ought to think of him as one who does the wrong things. But let's play this out. Let's follow the reasoning. Let's say there are immoral thoughts and opinions, and let's say white supremacism qualifies. If so, that's a distinction that requires precise definition in its terms. First, what is a white supremacist? Is it just if I believe specifically that white people are superior? What if I believe that all races are equal in value, but society functions best when they're segregated? Or what if I believe in measurable differences between races, but I don't make a value judgment about those differences? Or is it just the loosest definition of white supremacist we often see these days? Anyone who voted for Trump. And is it specific to the white race? What if I believe that black people are superior? Or what if I believe every other race is superior to the white race? What if I'm a multiracial supremacist? If we can't define this term adequately, it'll be awfully hard to ban it. Second, what makes white supremacism a uniquely immoral opinion? What separates that opinion, in moral terms, from other opinions of controversy? The reason these questions are so important is because it is crucial for this argument to set boundaries that assure that banning this one particular idea won't set precedent for banning any idea the majority finds immoral or otherwise odious. If you want to argue that white supremacists should be banned from legal practice, you'll need to craft a case that doesn't also serve any argument that people with X opinions should be banned from Y activities. Otherwise, I'll take your reasoning, flip it, and use it to ask other rhetorical questions. Should Black Lives Matter activists be allowed to be teachers? Should communists be allowed to run for office? And how about this pressing question? Should leftist women, like our author here, be allowed to write articles at all? You can try to make a case that other people's opinions should be banned, but yours should remain on principle. But I'll contend that the only principle under which such an argument operates isn't a moral one at all. It's just protecting stuff you like and punishing stuff you don't. And the only variable that matters in that arrangement is who is in power to do the protecting and the punishing. I don't want white supremacists banned from practicing law for the same reason I don't want leftist women banned from writing articles, for the simple principle that we should protect the rights of everyone, regardless of whether I personally agree with them or not, and no matter how strongly. Let freedom of speech and freedom of association function freely. If you don't like your lawyer because of his opinions or any other reason, don't hire him to represent you. If you don't like authors of a certain persuasion writing poorly conceived articles, don't read them. Unless you're like me and you have a weird appetite for that sort of thing. But the point remains, nobody is forcing anybody to associate with either of these things. And the fact that most people aren't attracted to either of them is exactly the reason they'll be minimized, if not outright disappear over time. Intervening is neither practical nor moral. There is no morality in attempting to infringe upon the rights of others, even when you disagree strongly with how they exercise them. When encountering simple thoughts you don't like, Jeff Bridges said it best.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Remember his wisdom, leave others to the freedom of their own thought, and move along with your day. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it.